Excuse me, Mr. Duffey.
There you go,
Duffey.
brothers. Arranged before your eyes.
Mr. Duffey, I hate to interrupt your set here, but
well,
a little bit of
bitch.
business to do.
That sounds like Lee Michael, doesn't it?
Yes,
that sounds like Lee
here
Michael
from
Dempsey, a voice I've heard on the radio saying hi.
Well, John, this past week was the International Bluegrass Music Association banquet and awards presentation, and you were here last Thursday night when we were having the banquet. But John Duffey won. He's into the Hall of Fame for the International Bluegrass Music Association. And John, since you couldn't be there, the presentation was done by Ron Thomason from the Dry Branch Fire Squad, and we thought we would bring it here to you.
Did you get a tape of that?
We're going to hear it right now. As
I
a
would
matter
love
of
to
fact.
hear it.
We're going to hear it right now.
Are we here right now?
When I was just a little redneck down in Russell County, Virginia, in the 3rd grade, practicing to be a school teacher up in Ohio, I'd sit around with the other college students and talk about intellectual, eclectic things. People from Boston will understand this, but that's a part of Kentucky a lot of us never get to, and the rest of you just have to take my word for it. We'd sit around, and times people, they talk about the greatest philosophers in the world, and they talk about the greatest poets and the greatest writers, and then all us folk singers, because there wasn't no money in bluegrass, we sung folk music. We'd sit around, people talk about the 5 greatest singers in the history of the world, and some of them would come up with names like Janis Joplin, Enrico Caruso, Beverly Sills, Frank Sinatra, Ray Charles. And everybody'd get a turn, see, and you had to name 5, and I didn't get to go for about 20th. And so I had to name my 5 favorite singers, and I thought about it a while, and it turned out to be John Duffey and 4 other guys. So I'm here tonight to present a Certificate of Merit Award to John Duffey. And I could go on longer than what you want to hear about all the things John's done. I talked to him just last weekend. He gave me enough that it'd last through the night, and I had to add to that. If a man never did anything but start 2 bands like a country gentleman and the Seldom Scene, he'd have done something for bluegrass music. Part that burns me, there's no question that John's probably the greatest pioneer in modern eclectic bluegrass music, but what galls me is he also plays the best traditional music. He's practiced every skill of the trade. He's mastered his instrument. He's got all those little parts of the singing that the more you learn about it and the more knowledge you bring to it, it seems like every year John's got some notes that show you he's been working at it just a little bit ahead of you. And then, but to me, a Certificate of Merit, and when I see the people that have received it, there's more than giving it to a person who's a performer or who does something in the bluegrass profession or the bluegrass industry. This award goes to John Duffey, the man, and he's a fine one. How many people could get away with being Big Bruce so long? And I've thought about John's humor, and he's got a characteristic to his humor that almost nobody else has, and it is that there's no anger in it. And I think the fact that there is no anger characterizes John Duffey, the man, because he just sort of stakes out the ground that John Duffey's going to have, and just by virtue of doing it, he's made it better for everybody else in this field. He set some pretty high standards for the kind of sound systems, and by God, he was up here at this festival, and when he didn't like it, he went out in the audience and played. You're going to hear John Duffey one way or the other. He set the standards for fees. He said, I got to have a room, and it's got to have a television, and I got to have a lot of money to boot. And bluegrass is going to cost you more because of it, and everybody else has been able to follow along in those shoe steps, and I thank him for that. I thank him for his generosity. People would ever get to be around John. He just cuts you that space and pays attention to it and doesn't do anything else. And when you see Duffey, what you see is what you get. By God, he got that flat top haircut in 1955, and he kept it till it came back in style. One day I broke my mandolin and fell over on the stage. I'd had it about 3 weeks, and it was the only Lloyd Lore I had. And much I realized they're not supposed to have that curl on the end, I hated to see it go, and I was real upset. And Duffey was due on stage, and somebody told him, I've been glad to see him every time except one time he peeked his head in the tent. But he came over at this particular time and took time out from the Seldom Scene to tell me how to fix that mandolin, and I've appreciated that. I really appreciate the way that John just stands up there and throws that softball across the stage. And if he doesn't have no mandolin work, he gets a broom, does a little janitor work. And that's what makes bluegrass powerful, too, because everybody here knows how hard a work it is. And I think that John Duffey has exemplified this. I think that he deserves this award. And I'm proud to present it to him here tonight, not only to give it to John Duffey, the performer, but also to give it to John Duffey, the man. I believe it not only does credit to John, because I really believe that he exemplifies everything that merit means, but I also believe that it adds to the prestige of our award that we give it to a man like John Duffey, and I'm proud for him to have it. I thank you very much.